In January of 2014, a group of cave explorers decided to conquer the Lost Jones Cave in Lancashire, England. It's a vast cave network that spans a length of nearly 3 miles, or 4.8 kilometers. The known deepest section of this cave also goes down a staggering 690 feet, or 211 meters. Most members of this group had been spelunking for years, and like most other cave explorers, were quite confident in their skills. They had also done their research and mapped out their route in advance. But the truth about caving is, when things go wrong, no amount of planning can save you. Even the most experienced and well-prepared explorers can find themselves in terrifying situations. Which is exactly what happened to one of the members of this group, named Bob Johnson. The expedition was going quite smoothly in the beginning, with the group using the equipment they brought with them to continue safely. That is, until they reached a section of the cave called the Tube. It was an unusually narrow section that required the cavers to crawl on their stomach. And to make matters worse, it was also partially submerged in water, making it difficult to both see and breathe. Despite these harsh conditions, the group decided to move ahead. The slimmest member of the group went first and successfully made it to the other side without much trouble. The next person, however, wasn't as fortunate. This was Bob Johnson, the man we mentioned earlier. His crawl through the tube wasn't off to a good start, as he was already having issues with the comparatively wider sections of the passage. He then somehow managed to reach the tightest part of this treacherous section. But that's where his luck ran out. He was completely stuck from the waist down, and any attempt to free himself only made the situation worse. Now, being stuck in a narrow cave like this is extremely stressful on its own. The walls close in on you, and every movement feels like it's pushing you further into the tight space. Panic sets in as you realize just how little room you have to maneuver, and with each failed attempt to free yourself, the fear intensifies. But as if the confined space wasn't enough to make its heart race, Badda had to contend with something far more terrifying: the rapidly flowing water. Water makes any caving venture 10 times worse. In a dry cave, even if you're stuck, you still have time to think and plan your escape. But when water starts to rise, the situation shifts from bad to life-threatening. The feeling of water creeping up around you in an already claustrophobic space is a nightmare on its own. The real danger with water, however, is that you have mere minutes before drowning becomes a very real possibility. Bob knew this possibility all too well. He gave his all to free himself. Unfortunately, the water was quickly filling up his suit, making it even more difficult to squeeze through. But when the situation seemed hopeless, one of the members had an idea that ended up saving Bob's life. Instead of pushing forward, the members behind him tried pulling him back, and it worked.
That's sad. Well, yeah, it looks like exactly. Well, yeah, I get it.
Bob was finally free, though his troubles weren't over. He later revealed in a comment that him and the 2 members who pulled him back had crawled for another 3 hours to get out of the cave from a different exit. This incident also left him traumatized to the point where he can't even watch this video without becoming anxious. From what I can find, he scaled back on caving and picked up a much safer hobby in cycling, and now appears to be doing just fine. I was 22 when this happened. Me and 2 of my friends, Miles and Ruben, have always been outdoor people. For as long as we'd known each other, we've always liked being outside and doing things that involved a bit of risk. One of those things was caving. One of our favorite spots was a secluded cave system that was essentially a huge underground maze of tight spaces and tunnels. The entrance was in an area of forest that was just off the beaten track, which was a good 10-minute walk from a gravel parking area where we usually parked. This time in particular, we decided to go into the sand cave system and try to explore some of the tunnels that we hadn't really been down before. Now, there weren't any drawn maps of the cave system, so instead we would use a set of rope that we attached to the entrance. We would take it with us as we went down, so that way we could easily find our way back up to the many different routes. We drove out to the gravel parking area. The place was empty, except for one car. It was a dirty white pickup. No, this wasn't unusual. Plenty of people use the area for hiking and other outdoor activities. As we got our stuff, I glanced over at it and saw that there was a man sitting in the driver's seat, just watching us. Trying to be friendly, I gave him a thumbs up as we walked past, but he didn't react to it. It was a bit odd, but I tried to ignore it as I'm carrying on towards the cave system. As we were setting up and getting ready to head down, I glanced over my left shoulder thinking I'd seen something in the tree line. I felt uneasy, but I brushed it off, chalking it up to nerve that would sometimes get before going into a cave. Anyway, the three of us went inside. There were a lot of narrow sections in the cave that took me by surprise, but nonetheless we were having fun. Eventually, we found this small area with a small waterfall. We all agreed to take a break and catch our breath. Afterwards, right when we were just about to continue exploring the area, something happened. I had the rope in my hand, but suddenly I felt a sharp tug before it went completely slack. That we used, we all pulled on the rope, and our hearts sank. The rope was completely loose, meaning it was cut by someone or something. We all agreed the best course of action would be to head back up to the surface, said Enrich. Without a rope as our guide, now seemed close to impossible. We were going to have to remember the exact route we took. I've never been in such a frantic state. We took multiple wrong turns, and tried to all turn around in there is not the easiest thing to do. But eventually, after what felt like days, we were all hit with a short wave of relief. We could now see the light from the surface, and a couple minutes later we were all out. But we were now again on edge. We desperately rushed to pack everything up. I was constantly looking around us for any sign of the person that cut our rope. Then, just as we were finishing up, I saw them. There were around 6 people, including the man from the pickup in the parking area, all standing in the tree line. My eyes were still adjusting to the daylight, but I could tell each of them were holding long knives. Miles and Ruben saw them too. We all ran as fast as we could back to our car, while we didn't dare know what behind us. Back in the parking area, the pickup, now empty, was still the only thing apart from our car. We got in and got out of there. We haven't been back to that spot since. We still don't know who those people were. We never saw them again. Action Adventure Twins is a YouTube channel run by brothers James and Edward. The duo has been exploring dangerous and cramped caves since early 2020. Yet, despite their combined experience, one of them almost lost his life back in 2022. In January of that year, the two decided to explore the popular Petty John's Cave in Georgia. They had already explored parts of this maze-like cave multiple times before, and had even found an underground waterfall during one of their expeditions. Put simply, they were pretty confident in their ability to navigate through this cave. But unlike their previous ventures, this time they were going to tackle one of the hardest sections, the aptly named Nervous Breakdown, referring to how cavers feel when going through it. Things started off just as expected, with the pair going through the narrow and claustrophobic entrance to reach the first open area of the Petty John's Cave. Whoa, enter through. However, it didn't take long for the cave to begin closing back again, forcing the two to squeeze through tiny passageways. But that was only the beginning. After about 25 minutes of crawling through increasingly tighter spaces, they reached the first big obstacle, a muddy room with a narrow and steep hole in the middle. They had to carefully walk around this hole to progress. A single slip and falling into the narrow hole and possibly getting injured. And given the lack of safe footing around the hole, it would have been near impossible for the other person to pull them out. After successfully navigating around this obstacle, they finally arrived at the entrance to Nervous Breakdown. Unfortunately for them, things weren't looking good. The area surrounding this entrance had collapsed some time ago, making it very difficult to figure out the path ahead. After looking around for a bit, Edward eventually found the real entrance and was excited to go in. He genuinely couldn't wait to find out what was down there and began his descent, leaving his brother behind in case something bad happened. What he didn't realize was that this was about to be one of the worst decisions he'd ever make. Because after descending for a few minutes, Edward called for his brother only to be met with complete silence.
I found a rope.
I'll hear Joe. In other words, Edward was now lost in an unknown section of the cave without any means of contacting his brother. At first, he tried to stay calm and continued his descent, hoping to find James before long. However, after staying separated for over 30 minutes, the realization set in. He knew panic was the fastest way to make a bad situation worse, but at this point, he couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease.
James! James! It's been like 30 minutes since I last saw him. I don't even know where I'm at. I tried to go back to the last place I saw him, and everything just looks the same. It's just a jumble maze. We should have never split up.
After calling out to James many times with no luck, he decided to retrace his steps and find the way back. Unfortunately, he had underestimated the difficulty of the maze he was about to enter. Every direction looked the same. The narrow passages and jagged walls made it impossible to tell where he had come from. To top it all off, his situation was getting worse with each step he took. If he went the wrong way, he could easily wedge himself into a passage too tight to escape, or worse, plunge into a hidden drop-off. This is the true horror of caving. Even if he didn't injure himself, he could have just as easily wandered around aimlessly until his body gave way into exhaustion, leaving him lifeless in a cold, rocky crevice. The footage of him excitedly dropping into the nervous breakdown entrance would have ended with the camera recording his descent into confusion, of fear, and eventually silence. Fortunately, that wasn't the end of his story. After going in loops for a while, Edward spotted a single piece of tape he saw on his way down.
Oh. The tape. Yeah. Okay, this tape looks familiar. Oh, yeah. This has got to be the way. I'm getting close. James! Still nothing.
This unexpected clue turned out to be exactly what he needed. It helped him regain his bearings and finally head in the right direction. Finally, he heard the best sound he could have heard in that moment.
James! Oh. You're over here? Oh. Dude. This place is a maze, man.
Oh, hey, I see your light.
Dude. I thought we were never gonna see each other.
Dude, I know.
Oh.
The two stayed together for the rest of the expedition and made it out alive without any major injuries. They're still exploring caves on YouTube, but now with a lot more caution.